President Biden is still locked in final negotiations on his agenda to strengthen the country's social safety net, but this weekend he will travel to the Global Climate Summit in Glasgow, Scotland. The impending meeting has raised the stakes for Democrats to reach a deal on the measure, which the White House wants to tout on the world stage. Ed O'Keefe joins us now from the White House to talk more about the president's upcoming trip and the negotiations on the Hill. So, Ed, we saw you in that briefing with Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, as well as Jen Psaki. Sullivan did brief reporters today as the president prepares to go overseas. What are you learning about the preparations for that trip?
A few things. Remember, he's going first to the G20 meetings in Rome, and then on to this global climate change conference in Glasgow, Scotland. And I suspect that at the end of this trip, this White House at least may be more pleased by what happens at that G20 meeting than at the climate one. And the reason is they've got a few different things they hope to achieve here. Big one they've been working on all year is getting the world, or the world's major economies, to agree to a new global minimum tax, a rate at which no corporation could be taxed under. At this point, I believe we're looking at 15% at a minimum. And most of the world's major economies have now signed on. Getting the G20 to officially recognize that new global minimum tax would essentially set it as the world standard, because so many of the world's 20 largest economies are members of this organization. And so that's a major priority, obviously. Then there are issues related to climate change and trying to get financing in place to move forward with a lot of these big goals that the world has to beat back greenhouse gas emissions and somehow get the world in a better shape amid the rapidly changing climate and environmental concerns. But of course, the president's coming into these meetings potentially without a congressional deal on how to enact a series of aggressive climate change policies in this country. And so there's been a lot of talk about, well, if he can't get it done here, how can he convince the rest of the world to do so? The White House remains hopeful that that can happen. And of course, the other big issue that will be a topic of discussion is the pandemic and all of the health and economic issues related to it. Perhaps most urgently, global supply chain concerns, getting countries around the world to fess up if there are issues in their own supply chains that may lead to a shortage of a certain kind of good or delays in shipping materials to other parts of the globe. This has become a real problem here in the United States, of course. There have been warnings about the potential adverse effects on the holiday shopping season. They're going to try to get some movement on that at the G20 meeting. At those climate talks, you're going to have broad discussion, and again, and hopefully the hope of this administration at least is more global adoption of a series of changes to help fight the rise in temperatures, the rise of sea levels around the world. The president's going, his top envoy John Kerry will be there, envoy for climate change. Even former President Obama will be among those visiting. And one of the more interesting things I thought that Jake Sullivan did during this briefing, he took a bit of a knock at China and Russia, noting that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping will not be at these meetings in person, but only joining virtually. Sullivan went out of his way to point out that the United States and European leaders will be meeting together in person and will be working in a, quote, energized way on these issues of global concern. So a little bit of shade thrown perhaps by the president's national security advisor to other world leaders to sort of say to the world, hey, we're tackling the pandemic pretty seriously, and we're so confident in how we're doing that we're willing to send our world leader outside its country. Xi Jinping has not left China in this calendar year, something American authorities have noted as interesting amid potential concern there in China about his safety. And whether he would be at risk of contracting COVID-19 were he to leave China.
Well, I mean, the three major things that you just mentioned, climate change, the various, economic and other fallout as a result of the pandemic, and the corporate tax. I mean, these are all things that if you had China signing on to them, it would make a significant difference.
Right.
The fact that that China's leader isn't there, I think it says something. But as you point out, he hasn't actually traveled for anything else, so he could be just maintaining sort of the status quo as his country deals with the pandemic and various spikes that we've been hearing about here and there. So let me talk to you about the status of the president's social spending bill. As you point out, the president's going to go to Glasgow and he's going to, put pressure on other world leaders to get their countries in line to, attain some of these very lofty goals. But he hasn't been able to do that here at all. What's the status?
There's no deal until there's a deal, or nothing's agreed to until everything's agreed to, as one senior lawmaker said to our colleagues last night. And at this point, Still no word on an official plan to move forward with the big social spending and climate change agenda. The Senate continues to negotiate the details, Democrats among themselves. They are expecting here at the White House a handful of lawmakers to meet with the president and other senior advisors this afternoon. We don't know who exactly is coming over. Of course, he had that meeting at his Delaware home on Sunday with Senator Joe Manchin, a key moderate. We know that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is meeting with leaders of the progressive wing of her caucus today to talk about some of these details. So it would sound like elements are coming together. We're getting closer to a number and a potential plan to move forward with passage of these two bills. But White House cautioning, even if there is no deal, of course, telephones work on Air Force One most of the time, and they do work from overseas. And so if the president has to be engaged in domestic matters while dealing with the world stage, he can do so, and he's prepared to do it.
Ed, the president is going to travel to Virginia to stump for Terry McAuliffe tonight. McAuliffe has not talked a lot about the president during this campaign. Is that by design?
Well, he's talked about it in this sense, Vlad, and he did it in an interview with us last week, you may recall, in that he would like to see Washington doing more to demonstrate that government is doing its job. And, of course, Washington right now is controlled by his party, so in essence he's taking a knock at the president and congressional Democrats and say, hey, cut this deal already. Get these bills moving. Demonstrate to voters here in Virginia that you're able to do things, and help me prove that Democrats can continue to do things, whether it's at the national level or at the state level. New Jersey and Virginia hold governor's races next week. They're the only two states that do so the year after a presidential election. And historically in Virginia, the party that wins the White House in the even-numbered year loses the state house the following year. Terry McAuliffe defied that history back in 2013 when he won as a Democrat the year after President Obama's re-election campaign. In Virginia, you can only run for one term at a time. You can come back and run again later. That's what McAuliffe's doing. He's hoping lightning will strike twice. Right now, based on our average of surveys and our own polling, our polling unit would suggest that Terry McAuliffe is ahead right now by about 2 points. Statewide races in Virginia are always won by single digits. They're always tick-tock tight. In this case, it's probably going to be, again, both Democrats and Republicans convinced they can eke it out. It's probably going to be a late night next Tuesday. The president going across the river, literally just going across the Potomac River to a park on the other side across from a big Costco in the shadows of the Pentagon to rally with Democrats in Arlington County, a major Democratic stronghold, to try to convince those that either have the opportunity to vote early or who can show up next Tuesday to please do so on Terry McAuliffe's behalf. A Democratic loss, despite that history we talked about, would be incredibly demoralizing in Virginia because it would be a signal that if they cannot sustain Democratic support in a state that has hued blue in recent political cycles, they're going to have a hell of a time holding on to congressional seats and state houses in next year's midterm elections.
See, that is why I call Ed part of the election night dream team. And I don't know if you saw the graphic, but the graphic, Ed, is worthy of dream team status. Thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate you popping out here so quickly.
Take care. And we'll see you next Tuesday, if not before.
Looking forward to that.
Got it. So, yeah. Speaking of that dream team, we're talking about Red and Blue with live coverage on election night. Elaine Keano, Ed O'Keefe, and Major Garrett will be joining a team of correspondents following the latest developments in all of the key races. You can stream that starting at 5 p.m. Eastern. That is on November 2nd on CBSN.